Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. You know, one question I ask every guest on Everyday Martial Artist is about their favorite martial arts book. And there's never been one quite like Martial Theory by Steve Pearlman, described as the art of war for the martial arts. Martial Theory helps any martial artist or instructor take their understanding and teaching to the next level. And at martialtheoryU.com, you'll find a global community with instructor groups, Q&A with Steve, live events, and demonstrations to help you apply martial theory directly to your training. It's not just a book, it's a movement. Find Martial Theory on Amazon, and when you join martialtheoryU.com, use discount code EverydayMA for 20% off. That's under $20 a month for life. That's martialtheoryU.com, code EverydayMA. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts and other stuff they're involved in. My guest today is the founder and senior instructor at the internationally recognized Life Keto Martial Arts and Personal Development Academy in Austin, Texas, where for over 32 years, he's dedicated himself to helping people of all ages cultivate calm, confidence, and connection both on and off the mats. His acclaimed Life Keto system blends the wisdom of movement of Systema, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Tai Chi, Tang Soo Do, and self-defense into a powerful integrated approach to martial arts and personal growth. He's a certified Systema instructor under Vladimir Vasiliev and began his martial arts journey as a child, training in wrestling, Tang Soo Do, and Tae Kwon Do before continuing into adulthood with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Systema, Tai Chi, and boxing. He's also the author of several Amazon best-selling books. Through his martial arts, books, and teaching, his mission remains simple yet profound: to help others find their flow, live with purpose, and embody strength through inner calm. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. Jonathan Hewitt. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
I am doing wonderful. Thanks for having me here, Brian.
Hey, thank you, man. Seriously, I tell every one of my guests, but I truly, truly appreciate this. Anytime someone's willing to give me the time to do this, it means a lot, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you and hearing your story.
Great. Well, I look forward to our time together.
Cool. Well, I know you said you've listened to a few episodes, so you know how we kick it off, but I said you've been doing it since a child, but I want to know what led to that, where that first interest came from, that first spark that kicked off your martial arts journey.
Yeah, as a child, I don't have a great memory, but I remember my younger brother and I said to him, hey, maybe one day we'll go to like the Orient and find some wise old man and learn how to really do martial arts. So I don't know if it was the Joe Himes book or what it was, but something provoked that interest in us and learning like the deeper meanings of martial arts and training. And then we started going to different karate schools. And then like many people, something happened, or it was a bad neighborhood, or school happened, or sport. So it was very on and off with different martial arts, different studios, but definitely started at a very young age and on and off throughout my entire life.
Do you remember what that very first school you went to was?
Yeah, I have this sense that it was like a kind of like typical schools back in, the whatever it was, 70s, 80s, that where you go and it's like in a basement and it's dark and smelly and mostly men that want to fight, and you're a kid and you look up to everybody. There's some guy named Brownie who had a brown belt, and we all looked up to him. And I remember him telling us a story on the beach, and a dog attacked him and he jumped out of the way and hit it in the nose and stopped it. And we're all like, wow, that's so amazing. So it was very, very like that as a child, like story awesome. At a martial arts school with all the people you look up to.
I love that. How old were you probably at that first school?
Probably 7 would be my bet.
Okay. And do you remember how long you stayed at that one?
I feel like I probably have about 25 green belts from different schools.
Wow.
As a kid. No, I'm exaggerating. I'm totally exaggerating. But I remember as a kid, like we would stay at one school for a little while. And then there was a Tang Soo Do school close to where we lived. And my younger brother got a black belt there. So I started hanging out at that school more when I wasn't wrestling. And so that was probably the most consistent, the Tang Soo Do school in Connecticut, before I went off to college and trained at other schools.
So did you get involved in wrestling before traditional martial arts or after?
It was in junior high, and back then we would play a different sport for every season. And so it was time for a new season. So I chose wrestling.
Okay.
And I remember the first match, I got very claustrophobic and panicked, and I just flipped the guy over and pinned him. I was like, I never want that to happen again.
Wow.
So then, so I got very into wrestling, and I surprisingly really excelled in 10th grade and won the state championship in Connecticut.
Nice.
And then after that, it's very interesting. I quit.
Really?
Yeah. And, I remember at the time my parents didn't like me cutting weight, and I was already small and in 10th grade and losing weight before matches, and the whole thing seemed very unhealthy. And they just said, we just don't think this is very healthy for you. And I really think it was the fear of not performing at that level again, because it was all over the newspapers and it didn't really happen from our school in wrestling.
Yeah.
And so it was all of a sudden I was this name for wrestling. And the truth was, it was mostly just instinct and natural ability. I didn't have a lot of technique or skill.
Okay.
So I think I was confronted with that of like, how are you ever going to live up to this again?
Wow. Okay. And, back then that's, at least to my knowledge and most people I talk to, wrestling wasn't really considered a martial art back then, where nowadays it pretty much is. I think that because of the UFC now, wrestling's considered a martial art, so it's a lot of people I talk to, like, I started, martial arts when I was 15, and I find out they started wrestling when they were 4. I'm like, well, so
yeah, exactly.
Actually started, wrestling when you were 4. Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool that you did that and excelled in it. And I'm curious, I'd love to know, because I know in Minnesota where I grew up, wrestling, maybe not quite as intense as Iowa, but pretty dang close, probably because we're so close to Iowa. It was, I had cousins who wrestled. My sister was a wrestling cheerleader. I grew up, watching high school wrestling. I didn't do it myself. Coach tried to get me to do it when he found out I did martial arts. He tried to get me to do wrestling, but never had an interest in wrestling myself. But was it pretty big in that area too?
It really wasn't. I mean, where I was, football was the big sport.
Okay.
I played soccer and wrestling and gymnastics, but it was, once I won the states around the area, it was very big. But I think more upstate in Connecticut where I was, it was bigger. And then obviously where you're from in Iowa and other states, it was one of the main sports.
Yeah. And you said gymnastics also.
Yeah, I did. So in junior high, I did soccer and then wrestling and gymnastics and a little baseball and tennis. But I think soccer and wrestling are the ones that I really excelled at.
Okay. How long did you do gymnastics for?
Until you started having to do like crazy things. And I was like, I can't do that. There's no way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting in, say, gymnastics or certain arts like that. I think there's obviously skill development, but some people are just very comfortable being upside down and twisting and flipping.
Yep.
And some people like me, not only am I uncomfortable, but like as far as that inner ear balance thing, it wasn't ever quite right for me. So there was just, I had no interest at that point when I saw my friends doing what they were doing.
Yeah, I had a classmate. I think she moved here in either 4th or 5th grade to my hometown, but she was on varsity gymnastics as either a 4th or 5th grader. And she was better than majority of the high schoolers. I mean, she's out there doing things like double, triple flip. I remember like our senior year, she was featured on ESPN and stuff like that. But I remember hearing from people that when she came along, a lot of girls quit.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, a couple of years ago, we went to like the NCAA women's like top 3 or 4 teams in the country.
Cool.
My daughter was doing a meet there, and it was phenomenal to see the level of artistry and precision and strength. And I mean, what they do is remarkable.
Yeah. I'm surprised how many martial artists I talk to that also have that background in gymnastics also. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it really makes sense. I think sometimes people compartmentalize like different sports or martial art or this or that. But if you just look at movement and healthy movement and then connecting with other people in movement, and then you apply it, whether it's martial arts or gymnastics, whatever it is, there are a lot of similar components.
Oh, definitely. So now going back to, trying out all these different schools, do you remember like the first one that really, really stuck, that really felt like, hey, this feels right. This is something I want to hopefully try to do for a little while? Yeah,
that's very, very interesting. So I mean, when certain schools, the culture felt more inviting, and it was, depending upon where you're at in your evolution as far as a martial artist and a person. So sometimes I go into I was in New York and I worked at a Tae Kwon Do school after college for a little bit, and it was very quick and, kicks and high kicks. And that time that seemed really interesting to me and exciting. But a lot of it was just that sprinting trickery kind of feeling.
Yep.
And then at some point back in 2006, I just had so many injuries from training in martial arts for so long. And I really considered stopping and just trying to still teach if I could.
Yep.
And then a friend of mine who was a very seasoned martial artist, and I was never a fighter. He was like a street fighter, but also very experienced in martial arts. He said, you got to go up to Canada and check out this guy. And I was like, no, they're all the same. I've done boxing, jiu-jitsu, a lot of different arts. And then so I went up there to check out Vladimir Vasiliev in Systema. And as I said, I had a lot of experience in wrestling. So I got up there and I wasn't aware of how they were training, more about quality of movement first.
Yeah.
And so I was just sprinting like a wrestler. I wrestled one guy and held him down, the next guy. And he kept setting people over to me. And I was like sprinting, exhausting myself. And then, finally after the sixth or seventh guy, whatever, and I was exhausted. It was a huge guy. I just like panicked, I was like, oh, can't breathe. And then Vladimir, like after that went over, then I wrestled him. And it was the most fascinating experience I ever had in martial arts, because the only thing I can relate it to was it really felt like I was trying to wrestle like a wave in the ocean. Like it just didn't make sense, because everything I was doing, pushing or pulling, looking for some feedback to work off of, there wasn't anything that I could control.
Yeah.
And then when I heard him start speaking about the essence of Systema, and when he said to me like something like, you have to learn how to punch like a massage, I'm like, what? You're crazy. What are you talking about? And then when he said to me, he goes, Jonathan, you move very well, but you're too tense. I go, what do you mean I'm too tense? That's how you do martial arts. What are you talking about? And he's like, no, it's not healthy for your body or for the people that you're training with. Like when you hit them or wrestle them, you're affecting them with the way you're moving in your nervous system. So when he said that, something very truthful was wrong in my mind of like, oh, wow, this is a healthier, more natural and truthful way of moving than I was moving. And so it was very exposing, but also to me, that was the first time I felt like in a martial art where there's a sense of like, you can relax your home as opposed to trying to fit into a system, whether it's, I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I still do it, but it was very, for me, for a while, very competitive, the way I was approaching it, and very tense and stressful and not with my breath. And so the way he was training, just my eyes opened up to, wow, this is a way of moving that you can apply to any martial art, to any movement art, to life. And so that really rung true to me. And that was when I felt like, to answer your question, like this feels right. This like resonates on a very deep level as my home martial art, if you will.
Okay. So would you probably say that you really didn't take it seriously till you were an adult?
Well, when I was in college, I was training at Tang Soo Do school, and I would go regularly, and I would take it serious, but still it was secondary in a way, because everything else was, school, social life, whatever was happening. So it was part of my life. It was a sport, if you will, and it wasn't seasonal like other sports, but also it wasn't something like, I'm like, oh, I'm going 3 times a week for 10 years or something. It was, oh, I'm going for the semester, and then I don't go, and then I go. And so I was serious when I was there, and I felt very moved to do it. But I would say when I started teaching like 32 years ago, I was still questioning whether martial arts was my path for my life.
Okay.
And but I saw what a beautiful medium it is and was for personal growth.
So if you did, at what age, at what belt, at what style did you ever get involved in competition?
Yeah, when I was like a teenager or young adult, I did some Tang Soo Do tournaments, and like I said, wrestling. I did those, and they were fine. And I didn't hate them, I didn't love them. It just felt like something that you do.
Yeah.
But then after that, even when we first opened our school, we were a Tang Soo Do school, and we weren't going to tournaments, and we were just pretty much in house doing our training.
Okay.
And somehow, for me, something just changed where it became much more of a personal development medium through the martial arts at the dojo than a competition one. And I know people that compete and use it very wisely and are amazing at it and use it for growth and that. But somehow for me, at some point after doing so much competition in wrestling and soccer, I didn't feel drawn to it anymore.
That makes sense. Similar kind of question as far as you mentioned, obviously opening a school and teaching. At what point, do you remember your very first experience with teaching martial arts? Where was that at? What style, what belt? Yeah,
it's interesting. Somehow I was always thrown into this role of being like a teacher or something before I felt like I was ready. And I just remember different places, someone say, oh, Jonathan, go show this to this person. I'm like, what? I'm new here. What do I know? Or it was that kind of feeling. And then sometimes I'd work with people privately and they wanted me to teach them martial arts. So it was something that kind of happened very naturally. And I happened to be captain of all the sports I played, or most of them. So it was some role I kind of, whatever reason, people felt like it was the right role for me.
Yep.
And at first I was very confused about it because I thought like I'm supposed to tell people what to do, and that kind of old, more a militant martial arts style. And at some point I realized that that's really not how I help people the most. It's more about really connecting where the person's at and seeing like what's their next level of growth. And so that sensitivity as a teacher really started developing as I became more aware and sensitive as a person. And then teaching, like now I love, I mean, I've been teaching for a long time and I love teaching. Like I just thrive on seeing people take what you're giving them and growing as a person and a martial artist. And so as far as the teaching part, I think once I mean, I've been doing it on and off for my whole life probably, but when I really decided to take that identification on some level as an educator or teacher is when I realized it wasn't about me telling people what to do. It was about me providing a nurturing and an empowering environment for them to grow.
Nice. And was that Tang Soo Do that you first taught in probably?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. We started, so our school was Tang Soo Do, and then we started doing a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and boxing. So then we changed our school to progressive Tang Soo Do.
Okay.
And we were that for a long time. And then at some point, like my business partner and I, he switched to more online stuff and I was switching into Systema more. And so that's kind of when we switched the name to Life Keto and kind of used Systema as our foundation. And that was back in 2006.
Think back to when you first opened the school. What led to that? Like, how long before you opened it was it an idea in your head? Did you think about it? And you just kind of talk about that process and like, how you found your location and tell that story.
Yeah, it's all very interesting in life. Some people have a very clear picture of like, this is what I'm going to do. And I've known it from day one. And some people, you're just living your life and you're trying to be the best person you can, being, authentic and being a kind person, and the things kind of unravel. So I was not living in Austin, and I had a good friend who was here and just opened his martial arts school. And then I came and he was like, hey, do you want to be partners in this school? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to do martial arts anymore. I may just do Tai Chi and something else. And so then we started hanging out and going to school. And then all of a sudden, within a couple of weeks, we moved the location from where he was inside of a gym to another nicer space. And it just started booming. I mean, we would just have a room and we'd fill it, and then another room and another room. And just at some point we just had long waiting lists, and hundreds and hundreds of students. And then we've been on the same road for 32 years now.
Oh, wow.
And we have like a satellite as well in South Austin, but it's really become an incredibly thriving dojo and community of people.
Okay. What was the first name of the school?
Austin Martial Arts Academy.
Okay. Do you remember like that, maybe those first few months, like how many students were at your first class and how long did it take to catch on and start growing?
Yeah, it was a wild thing. Like when you said that, I think back to it. So I was in my car, I had like 2 cell phones. One was for like work. I had these index cards where I was, writing down people's tuitions and taking their checks and going to the bank and depositing them. And so we started very small. And then just he and I were teaching together, and then I started teaching more of the kids, him more of the adults. But yeah, I mean, there were classes with just a few people when we started, and we didn't really know anything about running a business. All we knew was that we loved teaching personal development through martial arts, and we had skill in martial arts, and let's do this thing. And then, one thing led to another, and you learn a lot when you're seeing what you're doing wrong and how you need to improve things, which is great. And then you see things that are working. So it was an incredible process. It still is today.
Yeah.
Of learning and growing as an educator, as a martial artist, as an entrepreneur.
So at the beginning, did you ever go through any of those scary moments? Like you had class and there's only 2 people showing up and you're like, man, I don't know if we can keep doing this. I mean, or did it ever not get quite that bad?
No, there were times, definitely. I remember another guy that taught with us was kind of doing our books, and he's like, hey, Jonathan, things aren't looking very good. And I was like, really? I thought we were doing fine. He's like, no. And I was like, okay, well, so at those times I kind of just said, just like when COVID hit, same thing, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this work.
Yeah.
So I just did everything I could as far as flyering and going around town and offering things. And then each time those situations happened, it helped us actually grow and improve what we were doing. So you always hear that, but it's really true. Yeah. When things expose a weakness in it and you use it to grow, then you can improve what you're doing. But there were definitely times where there was like, okay, how are we going to pay the bills?
Yeah.
And so when we started, actually, the guy that was my business partner, he was detailing cars. And so for quite a while, we were detailing cars before teaching classes. So we detail, go teach. And so that was our daily routine.
Wow. And I'm trying to, like, back then, I remember, the Taekwondo school I was at in the 90s, we did, to build students and stuff, build up, class and stuff. We did a lot of demonstrations around town. Did you guys do that kind of stuff? I know we were doing demonstrations at like, Barnes and Noble and Media Play and fairs and schools and
movie theaters, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. We did one when Mortal Kombat opened. So
Yeah, I remember going to the movie theaters. Yeah, we would definitely go to schools. And I think, again, since we were really focusing on personal development, we'd go in and do things with the schools, but we'd also teach personal development within the schools, which they always appreciated. So ever since we started, I've been doing continuing ed workshops for school teachers and doing seminars for assemblies at schools. And so it's been a big part of our kind of our community growth. So that's something else that's really helped our schools, that I'll work with corporations and parents and teachers and teaching our personal development through those mediums.
I still remember one of the best promotions my instructor ran. He had just moved to a new, bigger location and classes weren't as big as he was hoping. And so he came up with this idea. And because he's always been one, no contracts. That was his big thing, no contracts.
Mm-hmm. Us too, yeah.
Yeah. So he ran this promotion and he basically said, if you are currently stuck in a contract at another martial arts school that you don't want to be at, come see me, bring your contract, and I will let you finish out your contract at our school and I will not charge you until that contract's up.
Wow.
And he gained a lot of students.
Wow. See, that's a beautiful thing. On one level, it's like that there's a lot of integrity as far as his intention and not doing that. But then you can see how people on the other side of the coin are like, hey, man, you're stealing my martial arts students. That's not very cool.
But it's like, well, they don't want to be there for some reason.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I definitely saw both sides of it, but it's like, you know, and I know one of those instructors, I was mad at him. He was my original Tae Kwon Do instructor, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. So he was not a good person. So I definitely see why it worked.
Yeah, it's unfortunate with, like when you said that I flashed you, so I graduated college and moved to New York City and I went to this Taekwondo school and I started training and the guy's like, hey, you're going to work here. He was like a Korean 8th degree master. I'm like, no, I can't, I'm busy. He goes, no, you're going to work here. I'm like, no, I can't. He's like, you're going to work here. I'm like, I can't, all of a sudden 2 weeks later, I'm working there.
Oh, wow.
And he was an amazing martial artist, but you just saw the things behind closed doors that were just really not very cool. And that was very disappointing. And there were great benefits. Like for lunch, all the Korean masters from New Jersey and other areas would come over and they all were like teaching me and training me and having lunch with them. It was really cool in a way. Yeah. But then seeing what he was doing behind closed doors as far as how he took care of himself and the money stuff and what he was doing with his day, it just didn't feel right to be part of a school that it wasn't coherent as far as like what you're saying, what you're teaching and how you're living.
Wow. That's crazy. That's some of the horror stories I've heard over the years. And
it's unfortunate. I mean, it's in any industry when people get power, I think, and don't know how to be humble and actually to manage that power and within themselves. But martial arts, you definitely can get a certain type of personality and a certain type of power. And if you're not really humble and genuine and have clear intentions, it's very easy to get tricked by that sense of power. So it's all too common, but hopefully it's more and more people are not going that path.
Yeah. And especially too with an industry that's not really governed. I mean, yes, there are groups that have their own governing body, but overall martial arts is not, because I've told this story a few times on my show. Obviously nowadays with the internet where you can find any information, it would be a lot harder to pull this off. But when I lived in California for a year, I remember I didn't actually go to the school, but I remember reading the story in one of the local newspapers. There was a martial arts instructor like 40 miles from where I lived that, well, I shouldn't even say martial arts instructor, but basically he had the school, was open for so long, and then one day he just disappeared, closed the doors. And after he left, they found out that he literally had no training. He ordered some VHS tapes on martial arts techniques, and he would literally go in his office and watch the tape before the class and then go out and teach that.
Wow.
And that's what he did for like a year and took all these people's money and stuff. And then just I wish I could remember the name. I really do. But I can't.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
When you said that, it reminded me. I mean, this guy wasn't like that because he was an amazing wrestler.
Right.
When in the 90s, when BJJ first started happening in Austin, and like we had Carlos Machado come to our school and some other people in Helson Gracie. And so, we had some really good quality stuff going on. But before it started becoming more common, this one guy was teaching us techniques and he was, at that time charging a lot for a private lesson.
Yeah. And
then later on, I found this manual. I'm like, oh my God, he's teaching us right out of this manual each week. It's like by the page. I'm like, I could have bought the manual for like 1/10 of one private lesson.
Yep.
So
that's funny.
Interesting.
It's very, very funny. So do you remember the first ever student you brought from white to black belt?
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
And if so, are they still with you?
Yeah. You know what? When you said that right now, I got an email yesterday from a mother at our dojo now. who has a kid at her dojo who got her black belt with us and her other kid lives either further away, and he just started BJJ, and she took a picture and sent it to me and said, "Oh my God, this brings so many memories of when I started with you." And so that's happened a few times where we've not only had, black belts, but then they've come back with their kids since we've been there so long. Really fascinating.
It is cool. I mean, I see that at our school too. And it's like, hey, I remember them. And this is your kid. It's like, because in my mind, I hadn't seen them in like 15, 20 years. In my mind, they're still like in their 20s. Of course, when I see them.
And you're still the same, right?
I know.
Like, I have an age, right? But
exactly.
You see them.
Then they walk in like, oh yeah, this is my 12-year-old kid. I'm like, oh my God, I'm old.
I know. And I remember one day some lady came in. She's like, "Can I ask you a question?" I'm like, "Sure." She said, "Have you been teaching for a really long time?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "A really long time?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I told my husband that you were my teacher when I was in middle school. He said, there's no way. He's not old enough." And I was like, "Yes, that was me."
Wow.
I'll tell you an interesting thing about the black belt. So when we definitely have had quite a few black belts, but our school takes about 10 years to get their black belt. And so in the beginning, when we were Tang Soo Do and BJJ, I mean, our black belts were very, very good and very well trained. Mm-hmm. The thing I noticed now today is with Systema, they're still really well trained and really, really good. There's just a different quality of movement.
Yeah.
And I think this is too general, but it's almost like before we were moving like sticks and now we're moving like water. Okay. And, there's a time and place for both, but overall in life in general, I think learning to flow and be more like water serves us better as far as our health and actually the way we can train in martial arts. So it's fascinating to see the black belts through the decades of how they've changed and evolved as well.
Yeah. So when you were first teaching and doing the Tang Soo Do and BJJ, were most of your students at the time cross-training in both, or did they get to choose? How did that work?
Yeah, I still do this today. And people ask me like, "So when's the Systema class?" I'm like, "Every class." "When's the BJJ class?" "Every class." "Well, when do you do karate?" "Every class." They're like, "What do you mean?" So what I basically do, the way I say it is like, if you get rid of weapons for a moment and you think about martial arts, there's punching, kicking, blocking, takedowns, and wrestling. Mm-hmm. So we do all of that almost every class. I'll highlight something. Maybe it's a BJJ, reversal this week, or we're focusing on Systema striking, or working on takedowns. But every class I incorporate always Systema as the foundation. Yep. And then maybe we're focusing on a BJJ technique, or kind of like Systema brawl type, where everyone's sparring at one time. Or giving a little work on katas. But even with katas, I teach them with the same kind of starting point of Systema, and then you snap at the end, where I used to just be tight the whole time during a kata. Mm-hmm. So we really incorporate all the systems into every class. I do have a Tai Chi standalone class, but in the regular classes, we also incorporate Tai Chi.
Okay. So then when your student at your school, one of your students earns their black belt, are they getting a black belt in 3 different systems, or is it like one system that you kind of combine the 3 into?
Yeah, it's one system. So they're a life keto black belt. And when I see, like, for example, I'm thinking of this one black belt that went off to Johns Hopkins for college, and he became like the BJJ president of the club there. And so they leave and they're solid in the fundamentals of BJJ, more for self-defense than competition. They're solid in Systema. They all have, like, whether it's a couple karate katas or a Tai Chi form or both. And so they're very well-rounded martial artists.
Okay. And now, as a teacher, as a school owner, do you yourself still get time to go and train yourself with like your former instructors or stuff? Or how does that work for you?
Yeah. So what I do is I bring someone over weekly to work with just our team. So we do, like, right now we're doing BJJ every week with a local guy who comes in. And before, I used to have a good friend of mine who's an amazing martial artist come in and just work with our team. So it's not me or one of us teaching our team. It's having someone else come in. And so that's really, really nice for us to get together in that way and to continue our training.
That's cool.
And then I still do Tai Chi over my friend's class sometimes. I don't go as consistently, but I still practice on my own regularly. And then Systema, I teach, I think about 5 days a week still now. So every day when I'm teaching, I'm constantly doing Systema.
Okay. I was just going to ask, how many days a week are you teaching right now?
Yeah, less than I used to as far as the amount of classes, but I still teach 5 days a week. Okay. And then even, for example, like, we're going to be bringing Vladimir Vasiliev to Austin. We're hosting him in January for a big Austin Systema festival.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be another great opportunity to train.
That's really cool. Nice. Now, you a little bit ago, you mentioned weapons a little bit. So have you had much weapons training? And if so, what's your favorite weapon to train with?
I haven't. In Systema, there's like this mindset that anything you put in your hands is an extension of your body.
Yes.
So I've trained with them, not with real live knives. Like some of my friends use live knives. I don't. And I've used chains before. I've used sticks before. In our dojo, like a couple of the other teachers are really into nunchucks. And so I did them as a kid, but not really.
Yeah.
But since they all are so good at it, I started picking up some of the skills. So I at least knew the basics to teach. So I enjoy those. We have like ninja stars, rubber ones the kids throw, and we have ninja obstacle course sometimes. So that's fun to throw. But I've never gotten really into weapons myself.
Okay. Is there just no interest or just haven't had the time?
Yeah, I think I'm really into fluid movement.
Okay.
So like sometimes, for example, like we take out the wooden knives at our dojo and we'll do knife work, but it doesn't feel different to me than just regular Systema work. Obviously, if it was a live knife and you were trying to stab me, it would feel very different. But as far as the quality of movement and what we're doing, it feels very similar. And I'll pull out big sticks and we'll use sticks to like, push each other, hit each other and things like that. And it brings a different element into it, but it feels very similar to me than just my Systema training and movement.
Yeah.
So I guess as far as like thinking about one weapon, like I see some of my students are really into one weapon and that's kind of their way. I've never had that. I've never had a weapon feel like my path or my passion within martial arts.
Okay. No, it makes sense. That's definitely not for everybody.
But it's cool. I mean, I really admire people that take the time and energy and the discipline to get a high level of any skill. So I look at some of these people doing these weapons, even kids, and they're phenomenal. I mean, it's remarkable to see the quality of movement with the weapon or weapons. So I definitely have respect for it. It's just not something that hasn't been my path.
That makes sense. And I said I was one who I grew up watching the ninja movies in the 80s. So that's, we had a local sporting goods store that would sell kids, in like 84, 85, 86. I used to buy throwing stars, throwing knives, nunchucks, tonfas, as like a 10, 11, 12-year-old. They were selling me this stuff. So.
And where do you throw the stars? Did you have like a board or something?
So we threw them at trees a lot. Yeah, I never really had a target. I think we might have found like a piece of plywood in my dad's garage and tried, painting a target on it or something like that. But obviously at that age, we weren't that good.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I went to Spain. My uncle was living there and he was kind of a troublemaker, I think. But so he had like those, I forgot the name. There's like a leather thing with a lead ball at the end.
Ah, yes. Yep. I remember
and he was
those.
using those like on the street, I think. But then I went to his house.
Wow.
He had this big board in the backyard with ninja stars. And I'm like, he took me to see Bruce Lee and it was in Spanish, it was hysterical. But I remember throwing those big stars. I was like a little kid and like, wow, this is so cool.
That's awesome. I know my current instructor, usually like once or twice a year, it's usually after like the kids have gone through like a big test or something, he'll bring out the big target and let the kids do throwing stars. Obviously he's extremely safe with it. Everyone stands behind the line. One person goes at a time. And he brings out this big, like, I think 6 or 7 foot piece of plywood that he draws, like, I think he calls them ninja monkeys. He's a really good artist. He'll draw like ninja monkeys on there and they get to throw the throwing stars and try to hit the ninja monkeys. So kind of cool.
We have this really cool thing with stars at our school, or one of the guys super handy, and one of our teachers there, and he took this big piece of canvas, like material. It's probably about, I don't know, like 6 feet tall, and he hangs it from the ceiling, and he puts all these different slits in like different shapes.
Oh,
and then we have all these rubber stars, and so the kids get to like throw for the different targets and different level of difficulty.
That's cool.
So that's really cool. Yeah, they enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, some of these fun games people come up with kids. I know one I've told a few listeners about that. A few of my listeners who run schools like, oh, we got to try that. But my instructor has this game he calls it penguin soccer, or that he'll do when they do like a fun thing where basically they'll take like the white belt and tie their feet together and get one on the padded floors and one of these big huge balls that's like as big as some of these little kids, and they have to hop and kick the ball and try to score a goal. So
that's awesome.
It's fun watching the little kids when they fall down and they can't get up because their feet are together. And
it's such an interesting thing. And with that, when you said that, it reminded me, like they have this expression called edutainment now.
Yep.
And it's a really interesting thing because it's so much more fun to learn through games.
Yeah.
But if it's finding that balance of how do you really get across what you're hoping to teach and use the time the most wisely, but also make it enjoyable for people. And that's definitely an art. To be able to do that.
Well, and when you can disguise it, disguise a game as exercise, and the kids don't really like it. He does roundhouse baseball, where they got to use a roundhouse to kick the ball, but then they have to like go squat down all the way and either duck walk or hop around the bases. So they're
That's great.
working their legs and stuff, and they have to, throw the ball they'll play dodgeball. They can only throw the ball with their less dominant arm and stuff, and they have to hop on one leg to do it. So kids think they're just playing games, but they're actually getting a darn good workout in too. So
yeah, wax on, wax off, right?
exactly. Yeah, I know. He doesn't have them do any vacuuming or painting or anything, but maybe.
Oh my God, I swept so many floors and cleaned so many mirrors.
That's right. Nice.
It's funny, when we first started our school, that's another funny thing. So way back when, our school is in an affluent part of Austin. And so, we were raised in martial arts, like cleaning mirrors and floors and all that, thinking nothing of it. So we thought, oh, that's something you're supposed to do. That's a really good thing to do for your students. So one day we started doing that with some of the students. We get these emails like, hey, I'm paying you to teach martial arts. Why is my kid cleaning your floors? I'm like, that's a very good point. You can see both sides of it, but it really is true. Like, they're coming, can I teach the same lesson through martial arts as I could teach them sweeping a floor? And I should be able to if I'm a skilled enough educator.
Yeah. And I know, like, a lot of instructors that I talk to, like, once you get to a certain, like, if they get their junior black, they get to a certain belt level, they no longer have to pay their monthly dues. They only have to pay for testing after that. In exchange, then, hey, it's your turn to take out the garbage this week. You get to vacuum after class, things like that. But they also no longer pay for class.
Yeah.
That's a little different.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes, as I'm sure you have to try to keep relationships as clean as you can. And when it gets like the water gets a little muddy, of like, oh, well, last month you only did it twice and you really should have done it 5 times. And then you start getting resentment. And so I found through the years that the times I've tried to, whether it was like so-called like barbering or helping somebody in that way, it didn't work out as well as like, hey, you know what can you afford to pay for classes? And can you commit to that? And we'll do that.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, oh, just pay what you can, or don't worry about it. Because then somehow it doesn't let people, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, their level of commitment is compromised because they don't have that seriousness of, wow, I'm paying, I need to go.
Yeah. Well, I remember that years ago when I asked it was back in like the 90s, we were sitting around after class one time just talking. And I asked him, I said, so if you won the lottery, sir, would you just open a huge school and just not charge? And he goes, no, I'd still charge. He goes, I'd probably lower the class, but he said people have to think they're paying for something of value. If they don't have to pay, they're not going to take it as seriously. So
yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of always stuck with me, and I get that. He's like, I told him, I said, if I ever win the lottery, sir, I'm going to buy you your school, and you can charge $10 a month. So
that's great. That's great. Yeah, I think it takes, like I was saying earlier about power. I think it's a similar thing with that. It's like it takes a very mature human being to not have to say, oh, wow, I'm not paying anything, and I'm going to go to class with the level of commitment like I'm paying all of my money for every class.
Yeah.
And to have that level of awareness and presence and commitment and dedication. So somehow, just for a lot of us, we just need that, like, oh, I'm paying for this, or this is my agreement. But I think if we all really learned how, no matter what we're doing, to show up and give the best that you can always, and to treat people with kindness and respect always, then it wouldn't matter, right? It'd be free or not free, doesn't matter, whatever is right.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we need these understandings to help people stay in the structure of doing their best.
100%. I agree. So I mentioned in the intro about, your Amazon, your best-selling books that you've written. So talk about, first of all, where did the interest in writing come from? Kind of what got you into writing? And then when did you decide to write your first book, and talk about that?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So many years ago in Austin, I had a friend who's a therapist, and he was training with us. And I was always going really deep into like personal development, meditation, psychology, all these things, and really trying to kind of crack the code, if you will, to find a simple way for people, kids, teens, and adults, to truly be happy and fulfilled. And I was just really into that. And so my friend, he started looking at my notes, and he's like, you got to write a book. And I said, I don't like writing at all. And he's like, no, you have to. I'm going to sit down with you. And this guy, this man, a very successful therapist, dedicated like 3 hours a week for a year and a half or 2 years to sit down with me and my wife and go through my notes.
Wow.
So then it was recommended that we first do a parenting book. So it was my content, but my wife put it together as far as like the stories and the science and all that, and a lot of the writing of it. And afterwards, she's like, I'm never doing that again. That was one time and that's it. And I was like, okay. And then I have all these other things I wanted to write about, and I just didn't know how I would do it. And then when I started hearing that I could take all of my ideas and information and I can write and then put it into chat and then say, hey, how would you improve this with what I just wrote? And then I would get that edit, and I would go back and forth like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times with every paragraph to where I was expressing what I wanted to express. And so then I started getting to a rhythm of doing that. And I think think last year I put out 2 books, The Circle of Confidence and Meditation Flow. And they both, came out in multiple categories and Amazon bestsellers. And what I love about them for me personally is they're just simple how-to books that anyone can pick up. And it gives you a variety of like a system and then a variety of exercises. So it feels amazing for me to be able to create in this way because I have this content that I would like to write about, but I'm not a wordsmith. So it allows me to write it and then to get support and in real time back and forth instead of having like a ghostwriter, which I wouldn't want, or somebody that I have to sit with for all the hours I'm writing and go back and forth with. So it's really, I've gotten into a groove now where like right now I'm in the middle of 3 kids stories, 1 other adult book and starting a podcast, but I couldn't do all of that if I wasn't able to take my content and get feedback immediately from using chat. So it's been super helpful.
Definitely. And I know that you're just in the very beginning stages of that, but talk a little bit about the podcast. And once it does come out, I will go back and put a link to it on your episode, but talk a little bit about the idea and what you're hoping to accomplish with that.
Can I give you a little full circle story about it?
Definitely.
All right. So when I graduated college, I was living in New York and I just started really questioning life. Like, what is the purpose of life? Why are we here? And I feel like I have so many good things in my life, but something's missing. And I met this man. He goes, why don't you read this book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior? And so I got the book, I read it, and I just started to cry. I'm like, oh my God, there's another way. So back then, you call information 1411. So I call information. I'm like, can I have Dan Millman's phone number? So I get his phone number. I call. His wife answers the phone. He comes to the phone. I'm like, hey, my name's Jonathan. I just read your book. Can you be my Socrates? And he goes, well, he was such a sweet man. He goes, well, that's not like my daily reality, but I do have those experiences. I said, okay, well, I want to find a Socrates. So then I pursued that path for a long time. And then when we wrote our parenting book, a friend of mine was at one of Dan's seminars. So I wrote him a note thanking him for the influence of that book in my life. So then he emailed me and we corresponded on and off through the years, just, little emails here and there.
Mm-hmm.
So then about a month or 2 ago, he also trained in Systema under the same teacher. And about a month ago, I had all these Systema videos go out online and he and I corresponded. And then we just talked for a really long time one day on Zoom. And I got off the phone the next morning, I was working out. And I was like, man, it's such an incredible conversation we had. I love those kind of conversations. I would love to share those with people. And so then I talked to him about it and he said, I go, you want to do it together? And he said, well, 2 things. He said, he has a lot of quotes and he says, when there's 2 that are alike, there's no reason to have 2. You can just have 1 or something like that. And then he said, also, I'm not really interested in doing that. And I don't really collaborate in that way, but I'd be honored to be your first guest.
Nice.
And so then I said, at first I told him, I'm not really interested in podcasts either. And I hear your point. I'm not really into collaboration in that way either, but it's just something I thought of. And I thought of the name right away too, when I was working out. And then, so I came back to him. I said, you know what? I thought about it and I really love these conversations. And so I am going to do it. So then I spoke with you and I have no experience in podcasts. And then he's sending me messages like, okay, so tell me the date. I'm ready for you. And I was like, I better get the ball rolling. And so you were very kind to give me some input on that. And so tomorrow I have my first interview with Dan.
That's awesome.
And it's called The Spiritual Ninja. And the name is basically, my goal is to interview people who have very successfully navigated the inner world and developed deep spiritual wisdom and inner peace, and also a very elite level on the outside as far as in their field or their craft, like an elite level of performance, and how those 2 are not actually separate like a lot of people think, but they're very integrated.
Yeah. And do you have a hopeful target date on when you're hoping to release it?
That's a great question. I'll ask my friend Brian for input on that.
Well, I mean, like the conversation we had the other day, it's like one thing I highly suggested was you said you wanted to do 1 a month. And I suggested get at least a good 4 or 5, a minimum of 4 or 5 done before you launch it. Because you don't want to, so many people go and they do 1, then they release it. And then they're like, crap, now I got to do another one, get it released like next week or whatever. So you don't want to be in that position where you're struggling to find a guest and rush to get it done. You want to have a little buffer zone. So if you're going to do 1 a month and you get 4 or 5 of them, then you literally give yourself 2 to 3 months to get another one done. But if you could get 4 or 5 done and just make a goal to actually record 1 a month, then you'll always have that 4 to 5 month buffer zone. That if some 1 month where you absolutely cannot find a guest, cannot get it done, you're still okay. You still got that 4 to 5 month buffer zone. That's kind of my suggestion. So I would say, like, if you're doing your first, depending when you can get your second, third, fourth ones done, I would say if you can get them done and launch in January, go for it. But I would say first quarter of 2026 would be a good goal date if you think you have enough guests lined up by then.
All right, I'm going to take your invitation and challenge to have them come out in January or February.
Like I said, let me know.
I have some interviews to do.
Like I said, once it comes out, I can put the link. I can go back into your episode and add the link at a later date. So we'll definitely promote the heck out of it. And always looking for more podcasts to promote people. And everyone's like, why do you promote your competition? I'm like, it's not competition. It's not like NBC versus CBS on a Tuesday night at 7. They can listen to it whenever they want to, and they can listen to more than one of them.
Yeah. And just me meeting you and listening to a few of your podcasts, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting person. Let me check out that person. And so it's all interconnected. And I think that's just a general thing as well. If you have that mindset of we're here together to help each other, as opposed to we're here to beat each other and take from each other. It's a very two different ways of living life.
Exactly. All right. So over your martial arts journey, is there one philosophy that you think is at the top of your list? It's just super important to you. You keep coming back to it.
Yeah, I think when I if I'm having a hard time and I said, okay, throw everything out, what is important? I always get back to being present, being in my heart, being authentic, being in the flow, being kind. So I think that's very martial art like. So the presence, the flow, the adaptability. So some people may say Zen or Tao, but I think to me, it's more universal. I like it. Did that answer that clearly enough?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. How about a worst martial arts related injury?
Ooh. You know, it's funny. At one point when I was going to stop martial arts, this one teacher said to me, he's like, you can hurt yourself doing Tai Chi and you can be peaceful wrestling. And I kind of laughed. And then one day I really damaged my meniscus doing Tai Chi. So that really, I mean, I've had, like a lot of people that, black eyes and things like that.
Yeah.
And cuts and stuff. But that one and the other one that stuck with me is one day I was down in Mexico City and this guy was demonstrating and he just told me, he goes, just be on the ground and don't do anything. And he just had his shoes on and he kind of stomped down and all of a sudden my rib popped out of the cartilage and was just sticking straight out of my shirt. And I'm like, dang, hey, I don't think something's right here. And we look at my shirt and it's like someone has a finger under my shirt sticking out. And so it's never gone back in. And it doesn't bother me anymore unless I get push on it. But for years, like wrestling and stuff, it would just, anytime it would be touched, it was like shooting pain.
Wow. Like if that was me, I'd probably use it to gross out my kids or something.
Yeah.
The demented sense of humor.
Sometimes people are wrestling me like, what is that thing sticking out of your rib? I'm like, that's my rib. And they're like, oh, gross.
See, and I'd be like, what'd you do to me? No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Nice. So what are your thoughts on like MMA and the UFC? Is that something you're a fan of?
I'm not as far as the violence and the aggression, but I am as far as people taking themselves to become incredible elite athlete performers, technicians, adaptability, like as far as movement artists.
Right.
So the level, I mean, I haven't watched them for a long time, but some of these guys and women too, their level of toughness and skill and grit and the hard work, I mean, can't not but respect that. That part about, I'm just a really strong believer in that we've been given this gift of life and that we're all come from the same source. And for us to hurt anyone or anything is kind of attacking that same source in the other person as ourselves. So I definitely have a more peaceful approach in my mind to martial arts. So that part, I don't like the aggression. I don't like people hurting each other, but I do have a lot of respect for the level of training and toughness and skill that people have.
Yeah. And I'm one who, same thing. I used to watch it all the time and I just don't anymore. A lot of it's just time, but I just, since I quit judging MMA, I just don't really watch it anymore. But as far as you were saying, I know a lot of people, Ronda Rousey got a lot of flack when she lost and she left the UFC. But when she first came into it, just watching her transition into a perfect armbar was such a beautiful thing. And she did it like how many times in a row and no one could stop it. And it was just a perfect technique. And it was like, people are like, oh, she keeps going to the ground. I'm like, that's impressive what she's doing. That's why she won a gold medal. It's like, wow. So yeah, I get that. I love, if it's on and I see it, I'll flip it on and watch and hopefully see some great techniques. But yeah, I don't like how it's, like some of the WWE type stuff and doesn't
Yeah,
impress me.
years ago, I had a chance to talk to Hickson Gracie a couple times on the phone.
Wow.
Just how we had really nice conversations. And
Nice.
I remember many years before that, we saw that video VHS of him. I don't remember the name of it from a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But watching that, he was training on the beach and under waterfalls, and there was like a very natural component. And you could see that, from my perspective, that he was really trying to train his inner and to be a true warrior, but from a peaceful place, and his level of skill and toughness and the way he was using his breathing and nature. I mean, there was something very beautiful, magical about it, but also he was obviously a very dangerous man as far as fighting, right?
Yeah.
So, that level of training is, you have to respect that. Somebody working so hard for so long and being able to do what they do. It just seems so, I know in nature and animals, they kill each other for food. I get it. I'm not denying that. But if you take two human beings, it seems like with what we've been giving and the intelligence we have, that somehow we would want to work together and help each other, not hurt each other. And so I think when it gets to the place where it's being valued, when somebody has just been beaten to a pulp, I have a hard time with that as far as humanity.
Yeah.
But I understand why people get into it.
Yeah, no, I get it. And Hickson's one, he's on my list. I'm hoping to get him. I have a few connections to him, and I'm hoping one of them will pan out and I can get him on the show. He'd be fun to talk to. So
if I get a chance to connect with him again, I'll definitely tell him too.
Nice. All right. I got a few fun questions we use to wrap up the show. And I know you said some of these are the ones you were worried about this because you didn't think you'd have good answers for some of them, but we're still going to go for it. So let's say, like I said, we were just talking about like the MMA, but let's say you decided you were going to do that. You were going to step into the octagon. What's your walk-up music going to be? What song's playing as you're talking that walk into the cage?
I know this sounds corny, but it would have to be something about unity and togetherness. It would have to be something like, hey man, let's just train and help each other out and not really hurt each other. Okay. Let's work hard together and grow and learn from each other, but not beat the crap out of each other. So what would that be?
I'd have to give that some thought. Nothing's popping into my mind offhand, but
maybe Imagine by John Lennon.
I actually want to say I could have sworn one of the times I was judging someone used that once. I'm almost positive. I'm like 90% sure I heard someone use that. I remember there's one local fighter that used to use Phil Collins in the Air Tonight. And,
wow.
And it was cool. It was the way he did it and stuff. And he purposely walked out during that drum solo and everything. But yeah.
Some people do. And when I don't want to sound anti-competition, because I remember years ago, the guy that comes over and teaches us BJJ, I remember years ago when he started competing and I was talking to him about it. And I was like, well, why are you competing? I was trying to get like his motivation for it. And he said the biggest part for me is the challenge of being who I want to be while I'm competing and not losing sight of like my center and my breath and using the medium of competition and the other person for that. And so for me, or if someone's like, hey, you know what, I've trained so hard and I'm going to go in there and learn from this person and work together and grow and, work hard, but not have that thing of like, I'm coming out here to tear this guy's face apart.
Yeah.
I think that could be a healthier approach for everybody.
I get that. That definitely makes sense. All right. Who are 3, 4, 5 names you'd put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
There are people that, like, even though I spoke to Hickson, I don't know Hickson, but from the video, I felt like his intention of having the whole thing, mind, body, spirit, I would say that he seemed to want to represent that. And same with Bruce Lee. Yeah. I think he really wanted to represent that. In my experience of Vladimir Vasiliev, he's in his 60s and his level of movement and power. And when I speak to him, sometimes on Zoom, and he's always so humble and so sincere and so authentic. I think he's an incredible example of a true warrior who has found a very deep spiritual connection. My really good friend, Gene Smithson, who's also a Systema teacher and a Tai Chi teacher and author, he was one tough street fighter kind of guy. And he got shot some years ago and like multiple times. And I saw him go through a healing process. And now he's in his 60s and he moves better than I've ever seen him move, with more power, more sensitivity. And so I think his level of depth and incredible fighting skills, I would put him up on there.
Okay.
So I think those are the ones that pop out in my mind right now.
Yeah, that's a good Mount Rushmore. I like it. Now, this one, obviously can't pick anything you've written, but a favorite martial arts book.
Yeah, so I remember as a kid, I don't know when that Zen in the martial arts came out, but I remember my brother and I reading that,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't remember all the details, but I remember, when you hear or see or feel something truthful, it just rings another level. You're like, oh, that's very truthful. So I remember reading that, and I was like, oh, there's something really right about that. And I don't know what happened from that point until The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, because The Peaceful Warrior, I remember thinking like, oh, there's another way of living. I didn't really realize that. So those two books, I think, definitely put something inside of me of telling me how I want to live my life.
Very cool. Yeah, Joe Hyams, that's my go-to. That's the one I recommend to so many people, and that's one person I wish I could have met before he passed away.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about him. Was he actually living that way and training and teaching that way?
From the people I've talked to that know him, it sure sounds like it. Yeah.
Well, I'll put him up there too then.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. How about a favorite martial arts video game? Did you ever get into gaming?
I never, ever did. I think the only video game I ever played was Pac-Man when I was at like a restaurant or something as a kid.
Okay. Like the flat top one where you sit on
Yeah.
I forgot where I was. I was someplace like 2 years ago and they had one set up. I'm like, that is so cool.
It's funny. Like you see, I mean, it's interesting. Like I know there's a lot of negative things about video games and people being on the screens too much. And I totally agree 100%.
Yeah.
But then you also have to look at these kids. I mean, part of their brain that they're developing is way superior in that area than ours, because their level of quickness in using both hands and adaptability on the screen is crazy, remarkable.
I know. Like I said, if it's not a joystick with a single button, I'm pretty much lost. The whole new pads with like 30 buttons on them. No.
Oh yeah,
I'm not doing that.
I'm a little tech slow in that area.
So to back up a minute for the book, about the book, have you read Hickson's book, Breathe?
I haven't.
Okay. I got it. I haven't read it yet. So that actually, I actually got it because I had, I think 4 or 5 guests pick that as their book. So I went and ordered it. I just haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Yeah. You like to check it out.
Cool. All right. How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Ooh, I don't really remember watching. Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea, I think Kung Fu was kind of very much what we're talking about, like the mind, body, spirit, right?
Yep.
Wasn't that the intention of it?
Yes.
So yeah, I think that always, whenever I saw that, I really resonated with that it just seemed like it was a deeper level of looking at the martial arts. And I think I'll speak for myself, but I think a lot of people get into martial arts because we're aware of some level of feeling weak on the inside, whatever that is, whatever physical, mental, emotional, and thinking that that's going to make you strong. And it does on a certain level, but there's other things also to address to feel strong.
And I've heard rumors. I haven't heard anything recently, but like about 3 months ago, I read somewhere online, and I'm hoping it was true, that they were talking about redoing Kung Fu, but as a movie. Because I know they brought back the series a couple of years ago with a female lead, and it didn't do that well. But they're talking about doing a movie, supposedly with Donnie Yen playing the lead part. And I really hope that's true.
Yeah, I think it's cool because if you think about martial arts, everyone always says, it's true, like martial arts, you develop focus and discipline and respect. And, I remember once years ago being at a big martial art industry thing, and this head guy of this big industry said to me, well, martial arts teaches this. And I was like, I disagree with you. He's like, what do you mean? And I said, you can teach life skills through anything if you know how to do it.
Yeah.
But I said, but martial arts has a unique thing as far as like that danger and that challenge with your partner and certain things, one-on-one. So it, as a medium, brings up a lot of things that are incredible for growth. But I think sometimes people just say, oh, martial arts, discipline, focus, respect. And it has to be taught with respect and discipline and focus, right?
Yes.
And it comes down to the teacher. So I think we always have to be really honest about it's an incredible medium and we can learn so much using it, but it has to be used wisely.
Agreed. How about a favorite martial arts movie?
I think the Karate Kid, as far as the relationship, had a big impact on me, as far as having a teacher that was looking for the person to grow as a whole human being and get great martial arts skills. I think that was definitely very impactful.
That's mine. That's my go-to. I don't think I'll ever pick anything else, because that's literally the reason I joined. So it was after seeing that movie. So
what year did that come out? Do you remember?
June of 1984.
Wow, you're on it.
I was 10 years old, opening night at the movie theater. It was, I want to say it was June like 19th or June 21st. I'd have to look up the actual date. Yeah, it was like the third weekend in June 1984. And as we walked out of the movie theater, the local Tang Soo Do school was standing in the lobby handing out free passes.
Wow, amazing.
Amazing marketing in 1984 for sure.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Karate school was just filled up. Like you could just put a sign out on the door and you'd have students.
Big time. Yeah. I mean, that's one conversation I had with a lot of my guests about like the different kind of martial arts booms in the US. And the first big one was Bruce Lee and Enter the Dragon. Mm-hmm. The second big one, Kung Fu, not so much. From people I've talked to, it was good and it did well, but it didn't really create that. Then Karate Kid was massive.
Oh, huge.
Yep. And then early 90s, it's kind of a combination of the Ninja Turtle movies and the Power Rangers. Mm-hmm. Those two had a huge impact. And then Walker, Texas Ranger obviously helped with that. Yeah. And then probably the UFC was the other big one that maybe for the wrong reasons, but definitely helped and get a lot of people through the doors and stuff like that. So I don't know if we've really had one since then. There's been some good shows on and some good movies. I don't know if any of them had that kind of impact probably since the UFC.
I know it's fascinating too. And you look at the trend of the different styles and all like the brilliance of marketing, obviously the Gracies with the UFC and then Krav Maga, they had a brilliant infusion of marketing somehow, where it became a big thing. And because Taekwondo, for one point, it was just Taekwondo. Everyone knew karate or Taekwondo, and they called everything Taekwondo or everything karate.
Yeah. Korean karate.
Now, and now, I mean, it's amazing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's like for the people that I speak to, as far as like the average parent, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the new karate as far as their languaging and understanding of martial arts.
Yeah. And number of schools. And like I said, you used to be a Taekwondo school in every corner. And now there might still be one there, but there's a BJJ school across the street. So
yeah. And even the Taekwondo schools now say Taekwondo, BJJ.
Yep. Oh, my instructor started adding grappling in like 94, 95. Yeah. A lot of, there's still many traditional schools that stick to just the tradition, but there's a lot of them have started blending in other stuff. They realize that they kind of have to.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's that whole study of society and how things shift and change, and the UFC exposed like, hey, I remember like I was never a fighter, like I told you, just to rewind for a second. I remember in New York, I was training Taekwondo and I had wrestled, and I was bartending and I was leaving, and this guy was at a bachelor party, like 6 of them. He was drunk. I was walking down the road with a bunch of girls, and he started running at me, and I turn around and I do like a high round kick, and then I grab him, and I, that move when you roll on your back and he kicks one over your head, and you like a judo type of thing, kind of. Yep. And I do that in the streets of New York City, like in the gutter. Wow. And I get up, and like this undercover cop, I go, that was so cool, man. I thought to myself, both of those moves were so stupid to do in the streets of New York. Yeah. When somebody's with 6 people, I could have cracked my head open. I could have slipped, and I was very much like aware, like you do how you train. Yep. And I was wrestling and doing high kicks, and they weren't really smart. So that exposed in me an imbalance in my training.
Yeah.
And I think the UFC exposed an imbalance. If you're looking at just as far as like martial art effectiveness, it exposed an imbalance in a lot of our training. And so I think it's good when something gets exposed, but then we have to use it for good, not to hurt people.
Agreed. All right. Final question. Now, this one doesn't have to be a martial arts movie, just any movie you've seen in your whole life, a favorite movie fight scene. And for this, I've had people go from Rocky to Star Wars to The Princess Bride to Marvel and anything in between. So just one fight scene that jumps out when you think about it.
Yeah. So when I thought of that, nothing did, because I don't have a great memory. I mean, I remember some cool things like the Matrix kind of stuff, but when I looked it up, I was like, okay, what's one fight scene that relates to me and life keto and what I do? And they came up with Kung Fu Panda.
Nice.
It said that, and I looked it up on YouTube. It said that the main guy, even though he was fighting this guy, he was trying to show him good, and he kept like rebounding and reflecting everything and not fighting force with force. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was very aligned with my belief in life and martial arts.
I like it. I think you're probably the second or third person that's picked that. So that's good. I like it. Nice. Well, before I let you go, Jonathan, is there anything I forgot to ask you, we forgot to cover, just last minute stuff you want to get out there? And like I said, when the episode comes out, I'll put a link to your school. I'll put a link to your books and anything else you want me to, but any last minute stuff we want to mention really quick?
No, I appreciate the time together. It's always great to talk to somebody that's, like you're obviously very skilled in what you do and have a wealth of information with martial arts, and just to share this time together. And for anyone listening, I just encourage people to find their path and be genuine to themselves and be a kind person. And martial arts is an amazing medium if you're interested in that. And there's also other mediums if that's better for you. And for me personally, if I can support you in any way with what we do, with inner wellness and personal development, we have lots of things you can do, but I just appreciate the time together and wish you and your listeners the best.
I love it. Seriously, it's been so much fun, and I truly think the listeners are going to enjoy this one.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for doing what you do.
Wrap up today's episode by taking your own training to the next level with Martial Theory by Steve Perlman, the book that's redefining martial arts thinking. Find Martial Theory on Amazon today. Join the worldwide movement at martialtheoryu.com, where you'll find Q&A sessions, live events, and direct guidance from Steve himself. Use code EverydayMA for 20% off for life. That's martialtheoryu.com, code EverydayMA. Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.